Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Best Bet. I am your host, Frank Scatoni, and I am streaming live from the private dining room at Ranch 45, right across the track on Via de la Valle. After this live stream, I'll be going into the restaurant, sticking around for a bit, getting a bite to eat. So anyone who's coming out early to the track, please stop by, say hi. We talk horses. I have to say this every week, just a reminder for if we have new listeners out there. This is not a traditional selection show. We're not going to talk about every race, just going to look at specific races and wagering strategies that offer the best opportunities to make a decent score. If you are watching live, feel free to leave us a comment or ask us any questions. The show will also be archived on Del Mar's Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube platforms. All right, let's get this party started. I've had the pleasure of watching today's guest evolve as a handicapper, horse player, and tournament player. I think he might have first attended the races before he was even able to walk, but I'll let him tell us that story. His dad is a respected horse player, so the game is in his blood. He does the work, he has clever opinions, and he's not afraid to put his money where his mouth is. Please welcome Tyler Hoffman. Tyler, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Frank.
Always. It's always a pleasure talking horses with you. You know, I know a few years ago you did Tom Quigley's show before the races at Santa Anita, and I think there was photographic proof of how long you've been coming to the races. You know the photo I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. No, there's the infamous photo with my grandfather and my dad holding me in front of the escalator at Santa Anita leading up from the paddock, just down from the fountain. And the first time I went to the track, that photo's probably 4 weeks old. I think it was the first time they ever took me out of the house. Pretty sure my mom took that photo. So yeah, I mean, horse racing's been in my family and in my blood my entire life. My dad and my uncle Ed are, the original tournament players together. They've been competing in tournaments for, well over 30 years. Yeah. Santa Anita and Del Mar have been our home bases and our home tracks, and we certainly love it.
So you spent a lot of time there growing up. You watch your dad, you watch your uncle, but at some point you had to get hooked yourself, right? It's one thing to be there and watch them, but was there a defining moment for you, or did it just kind of come along gradually?
I mean, as a little kid, I was always wanted to go to the track with my dad. It was our place to hang out. He taught me from a very early age, kind of, how to read a racing form, how to look at a horse, how to kind of approach betting. He had a whole system down where he would let me bet quarters when I was little. A quarter was basically worth. So if you bet a horse at 4-1, you bet a quarter to win 4 quarters. So that was kind of how we got introduced there. He used to let me take his old DRF racing form, and I'd calculate closing times on the turf, closing quarter fractions. So by the time I was in kindergarten, first grade, I was pretty good at fractions, which obviously doing, addition and subtraction stuff was pretty funny because I was a little bit ahead of my time there.
Yeah, I'll say being a math wizard at such a young age.
Yeah, but more where the influence got in was in tournament play when I became eligible. Obviously, a lot of people know me from my very first tournament score, which was on a little gimmick contest that Santa Anita hosted called Showviver.
That's right.
Where you and I actually met when I was, we're going back now 14, 15 years.
Horse Player Magazine. We did a story about you.
Exactly. But the big tournaments, the ones I wanted to play in, I wasn't eligible until I was 21, which obviously included, the big one, the NTRA, the NHC in Las Vegas. It's hosted once a year. That's an invite only. You got to win your way in. And then the evolution of live money tournaments over the last decade has really captured my attention. And it's something my dad and I love competing in, week in and week out.
Yeah, I always love seeing you and your dad at the track. My dad was not into horse racing because I sort of got into it at a later age, but we bonded over other stuff. And then I had a seminar guest yesterday on track, a young kid named Jackson Muniz. And when I asked him how he got hooked on racing, I think you'll appreciate this story. He said that when he was a little kid and his dad was getting him ready for bed, instead of reading him a bedtime story, he would pop in a VCR tape and show. I don't know if you remember this, but Trevor Denman used to host a replay show.
Channel 56 or 61. Yeah. Yes. KDOC or K, something like that.
His dad would record those shows on VCR tape, and they'd watch them until Jackson fell asleep. So he was just like in his head, he couldn't not become a horse player. So I love origin stories like that. The track is a special place. A lot of players learn the game through their dad or their grandfather or their mom or whoever it may be. So I really enjoy hearing stuff like that. But let's talk about, you mentioned, learning to read the racing form at a young age, obviously you have to grow and evolve as a player. Certain things that were important maybe 10 years ago are less important today. So tell us about your approach, as a handicapper. What tools do you use? How do you tackle a card? What are you looking for when you're analyzing a race?
Yeah, so there are so many things. The game is in so many ways it's incredibly complicated, and yet at the same time it's incredibly simplistic. So back then, when I first grew up around the track and was learning the principles of it, I was old school pen and paper is how I was taught. It was daily racing form. It was analyzing, running lines and past performances, looking at workout patterns, trying to come up with excuses for why a horse maybe had a poor performance that could be explained away and why today would be a good performance. And it was always looking for value.
Right.
If there was an advantage from a pace standpoint, that's really what I was taught. To this day, claiming sprints are still probably my best type of race. It's probably the one I look forward to the most. And, on a meet like Del Mar, for instance, where you really only have, one or two of those a day, those are the ones that I'm really looking to attack day in and day out. Now, the second part of your question of the evolution of how much the game has changed, CAWs, computer assisted wagering models, have completely changed the game, especially for the everyday, let's just say that the $2, $5, and $10 better. As many tournaments as I play, I'm still not a huge gambler per se from a handle standpoint. So those late odds hits that, go around, social media a lot and get talked about a lot, those have a big impact in the way that I play the game now. The other thing that's changed is just computer programs themselves and their approach to handicapping, especially in the tournament world. Unfortunately, a couple of years ago, we kind of came to the realization, my dad and I, that without a computer program, you really can't compete on the tournament circuit. It's just too hard. It's literally like trying to write something as opposed to using a computer. It's that huge and drastic of a difference. And the models that they have for odds and expected odds and anticipated odds really do make a big difference. So that's probably the biggest change between when I was little to where I am now. And it doesn't mean that the old school handicapping approach has been taken out the window. I mean, that is still used on a daily basis. That's still the foundation for everything. And I think it's incredibly valuable. I think it gives us an edge when we're competing in anything. And that's even day-to-day wagering. But it's a combination of both now.
Yeah, I agree with you that the computer programs are so good today that the markets are extremely efficient. It's a lot harder to find value today than it was 10 years ago. But to your point, at the same time, having the fundamentals of basic handicapping and doing the extra work and finding things that are not quantifiable, like bad trips or trainer intent, things like that, does give players like you and I who still have that old school foundation a little bit of an edge in order to try and find those horses that the computer models might not be locked in on. They whatever their model comes up with, they like another horse. That's the horse they're going to bet. They're going to make the market as efficient as they can based on the favorite that they like. But we can still find horses that maybe slip through the cracks. And then the other thing that you mentioned, which I agree with, you have to look at the doubles to see what the horse's price really is going to go off at, or use the imputed odds, because you don't want to make a sizable win bet on a horse who's 3-1 and ends up going up 6-5, or you might, but that's not why you're betting the horse, right? You need to know the odds. So I agree with you. That's really, really important. But I want to go back to the point when I said things that are not quantifiable and like trip handicapping. I know you do a lot of the work. You watch replays. Very, very important, especially at a meet like Del Mar, when you now have information from horses who ran early in the meet. Now they're coming back. How do you incorporate that into your game?
Yeah, trip handicapping is still a very valuable tool. Where it's probably changed for me in the last few years is trip handicapping, I think, in maiden races is incredibly important. I don't know how anybody bets a maiden race without looking back on replays, just because there is so much information to learn from that one or two video that you can go back and see. Now, trip handicapping, when it comes to a typical, let's pick an allowance turf race. Every turf race, you can find 3 or 4 horses that had a bad trip, but that's not necessarily indicative that horse's trip from last time is going to play a big factor today for today's effort. And we'll go through a couple examples of that through our plays today and dive into what that means in a little bit more detail. But in terms of overall trip handicap and going through it, I think it's something that takes a lot of practice. The more you do it, the better you get at it. I don't think that there's anything special or unique necessarily about the way that I look at trip handicapping. It's really just putting in the time and effort and writing down notes and keeping good detailed notes. For a meet like Del Mar, there are so many different things to learn when horses run back. Now, this year is a little bit different than in previous years because of the main track profile really hasn't changed at all. And it's been so strong towards inside speed. Yep. So you get horses running back that were against the profile the first time they ran, but the profile to date still has not changed. So they're going to get the exact same potential trip. So they're still against the profile, which is kind of a unique circumstance and something that I still think is probably going to shift here over the next couple of weeks before this meet ends.
Yeah, I keep waiting for it to shift. But I've noticed, because I watch the races live every day. I go back and I look at the charts. 5 furlongs, 5.5 furlongs on the main track. You cannot make up ground. You have to be forwardly placed. An inordinate number of races have been won wire to wire at those distances. Now, when you start getting to 6.5 or 2 turns a mile, I think the track plays a little more fair. I'm not sure why, but it does. We saw over the last couple of days, horses were able to stalk and kind of pounce and make that move that we're accustomed to in years past. But until we see more fair racing at the shorter distances, it's really hard to not use all the speed horses in a dirt race, right? Because no one is closing, no one's making up ground, not even just for the win, but like to finish second or third. Like it's so hard to make up ground in those sprint races. So to your point, watching the races, understanding track biases, understanding track profile, it's incredibly valuable. And back to the whole thing about trip handicapping, everyone can see a bad trip, right? And a lot of times those, what Pete from the I would call them the international bad trip horse. Like everybody in the world knows that horse has a bad trip and that horse gets overbet. And then what you said is a very, very good point. You could look at a turf race and find horses who've had trouble. Now, just because they had trouble doesn't necessarily mean that today they're going to run better. It depends on what spot they're in, what the pace is. So it's very important, and there are very subtle things to look for when it comes to trip handicapping. But the thing that I like most about it is, what I said earlier. It's one of the few things that we can do as human beings that the algorithms can't do. Maybe in 5 years, AI will learn how to watch horse races and develop trip handicapping information into the model. But for now, we have that little bit of advantage. So do the work, land on a horse, isolate the race, all that fun stuff. Talk to us about your general wagering approach, and then we'll get into tournaments because I really want to talk to you about that as well. But like today, we're going to go through a couple of races and talk about your wagering strategies for those races. But do you have any general philosophies or bets that you typically gravitate toward, things like that?
I don't think anything that I do from a wagering standpoint is all that unique than what most players do. I like looking at the pick fives, both the early and late. I've become a little bit more selective about which pick fives I go after. A lot of it has to do with how much I like something. I think it's, especially at a meet like Del Mar, where there has the potential to be such competitive races, especially the turf races. I think the 5 furlong turf sprints are almost a single or an all button because it's so much chaos. You either like something or you don't.
Right.
And so I'm really looking for pick 5 sequences to attack where I can be skinny somewhere and I can spread out and hope for chaos somewhere else. Now, on the day-to-day wagering, especially when I'm not going after the pick 5s, or I don't think the pick 5 sequences are worth going after, I'm mostly a double and an exacta better. Trifectas are kind of a new thing that I've been playing around with. Don't know that I've quite mastered them yet, but having a little bit more of an idea of kind of how I want to attack them and what I'm looking for. The general principle in any bet, really, the exacta, the double, or the exacta, is to find something to key. If you have in a race, let's say you like 3 horses, ideally you'd like to rank them. They're A, B, and C between what your preference is. Same thing in what you like for the exacta or the double. You may have 1 or 2 or 3 horses, but the key behind it is you can't be playing your C horse to your C horse because you don't really have an opinion at that point. You're just spreading out, hoping not to lose. Right. At that point, you're really not taking advantage of your wager. So my general philosophy going through is, whoever the key horse is, whether it be the horse I like to win the race or the horse I like to start a double or to finish a double, I'm trying to get to and key around that. And if I win, the opinion is correct, the bet should be worth something at least 10-1 or higher. Anything less than that, I'm really not even interested in, no matter how much I like the horse, because you just can't get that value. That's enough to overcome the loser that you're inevitably going to have. I mean, let's be honest, horse racing is all like baseball. You pick maybe 3 out of 10 winners, and you're a great handicapper at that point. The beauty is in pari-mutuel wagering, if you hit one, that may even be able to cover all the other 9 losses plus some profit from there. So
that's so true. It reminds me of one time I was walking into Santa Anita, and some guy comes up to me in the parking lot, and he goes, "Hey, Frank, you got all the winners today?" I go, "All? I just need one." Right? You just maximize that, bet efficiently, and maximize your strongest opinion. You said it earlier, this is such a challenging and could be the most complicated game, but it's also very simple. You like a horse, you bet the horse to win. And I'm similar to you. I'll play doubles, and I'll also play exactas with my key horse, to maximize my value if the horse wins, but also B, I call it like an exacta as place bet. I don't make place bets, but I would like to cover my key horse, especially if he's a good price. In exactas if he runs second. So, and you're just getting good value in that as opposed to the place pool. So I'm with you. I keep it very simple. I do tackle the multi-race wagers as well. But, here at Del Mar, you have to be very selective because you could bet a lot of those and not cash for a long time. So, that's you wear your bankroll down. So you have to be selective in that. Let's pivot a little bit. Pacific Classic Day, Del Mar has a $4,000 live bankroll tournament. I know you love playing in the tournaments. What is it that appeals to you? And you could talk about live bankroll and mythical as well. I'm just, curious. You said you got hooked on it, and that's where your strengths are. Yeah.
So the live money tournaments, what I like about them is the prize pool associated with it. So you can turn a day that you make, let's say $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in. And even if, let's say, the CAWs are on your horses and you lose 25% of what you should have made because of late odds hits or late bet combinations that were played, that prize money that you can win from the tournament is just another way to boost your bankroll. So I think that's very, very enticing. Obviously, there are a certain amount of majors, throughout the course of the year when it comes to tournaments. Think of it like golf, for instance. Right. So you obviously have the NHC, which is once a year. It's got a $750,000 prize, first place prize associated with it. Your handicapper of the year, that's a major. That's something you can't buy your way into. You have to win your way in through qualifying tournaments, whether it be a live money tournament or an online tournament on horseplayers.com or horsetourneys.com. So that's obviously something you always want to be in. You always want to give yourself a shot at a score of a lifetime like that. Yeah. The Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, the BCBC as it's called, another major in horse racing. It's a great 2-day contest. Obviously, it's got a stiff, entry fee. It's $2,500 to enter and $7,500 to play, but there are plenty of qualifying opportunities through it. And your guest yesterday, Jackson, he and I actually are a part of something with Peter Fornatail called the BCBC Diaries. And it's basically been documenting our journey. You were part of that. Okay, cool. I was, yeah. There's another gentleman, Justin Mastari, who's probably the best young handicapper in the game. I mean, he's already won the NHC, and he's come really, really close to winning the BCBC a couple times. So the three of us, trying to qualify and win our way in. Fortunately for me, I've already won my way into the BCBC, so those two are playing catch up for now until the day comes. But that's another second
entry, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a great tournament. With a $300,000 first place prize, and another major win. So those types of contests are really, really enticing, especially when you're a small bet and you're looking for those huge cashes that you really can only get on a day-to-day basis, probably in a pick five. And let's be honest, how many $100,000 pick fives are there in the course of a calendar year? There's probably only a handful of them, more than likely.
Yeah, exactly. It's such good value. And especially like the Breeders' Cup. I mean, the racing is just incredible. The pool sizes are massive. You can really do some damage if you have a good day. We got to get into the races, but I just want to ask you really quickly. A lot of players are at the intermediate level, and it's a big step to get up and take this game a lot more seriously. You got to level up. Is there any advice you could give that type of player? And for you personally, did you have like an aha moment where you said, you know what, I am good enough to, get a little more serious about this?
I think there's two things that players can do. And one of them doesn't cost any money. And it's actually incredibly effective. And I feel silly that it took me so long to figure out it. I had a good buddy of mine introduced me to it. But on drfbets.com, you can look at the projected odds in every single race. And that gives you a big advantage when you're trying to figure out what price your horse is going to end up with, and you're trying to figure out if the CAWs are going to give you a late odds hit. That gives you kind of an indicator. Now, again, it's not 100% accurate, but it does give you a little bit of a heads up to see, okay, this horse is going to get hit here. So maybe that bet that I was thinking was such great value isn't. And I think that's a big advantage to a wagering strategy for any player. The second thing is, I never thought I'd say this, but I think using some sort of computer aided program is a big difference in this game. It's such a huge advantage to other players that are using it. And if you're not, and again, I don't think it really matters what specific program it is. There's plenty of them out there. You can literally Google them, and there's a half dozen that'll pop up on the Google search. But something like that, I think, really does make a big difference for day-to-day wagering for anybody. So I find something that something that you feel comfortable with, that works for your style of handicapping, and incorporate it.
Yeah, it's like if you don't have that kind of information, it's like bringing a knife to a gunfight, right? You're gonna lose.
Yeah.
Here, I just want to put this on the screen real quick. How much did you pay this guy?
Yeah, that guy, he's a good buddy of mine.
Awesome. No, I love it. I just wanted to give you props there. I'm going to hide this, and we're going to get into the races. Let's see how good of a handicapper you are. No, we don't have to prove that. We know you're good. There are a couple of races you wanted to talk about, a couple of things you wanted to get to, and we're going to start off with race 5, a maiden special weight for 2-year-olds, 1 mile on the lawn with the rails at 18 feet. These races are very tricky. On one hand, I love that Del Mar cards these 2-year-old 2-turn turf races, but there's not a lot of information to go on. We saw yesterday there was a bunch of first-time starters in a race like this, so we got a few here today. We have a couple with experience. You talked about the value of watching a horse's first or second race to see if you could figure something out. What are we doing here?
Yeah, so the reason I wanted to talk about this race was less for wagering strategy and more just kind of going through what I thought is probably the most important race on the card. The reason being that today we have a 9-race card, and this anchors the late pick 5 and starts the early pick 5. So it's a race that's going to matter for a lot of people that are going to attack today's card. There are 2 principles when you're looking at this race that you're trying to figure out. One is, are the favorites beatable? Because if they're not, then it's a skinny leg on both ends of the pick 5. If you think that the favorites are beatable, there are some there's some second time and third time starters, alternates to go through that I think could provide some value for the pick 5. Or even better, if you have the bankroll for it, you can include all of it. You can play it both ways. And if you get, you maybe play a press pick 5 where you only play it to the 2 chalks, which would be the inside runner Ivan the Great and the number 9, Sabretooth. And then you play a base ticket that includes both those horses plus some of these bigger prices that we're going to talk about here in a second. So going through this race, a couple different things to notice. And we're going to start with all 3 prices that are up on the screen right now. We're going to start in numerical order with number 4, Tab Walker for trainer Dan Blacker. This one debuted in Churchill back in May, and the running line is ugly. I mean, this horse basically never got out of the back of the pack, ended up losing by 13 lengths. And anybody looking at the PPs goes, okay, he just didn't run. Like, who cares? Couple subtle things to notice about this one. This one took money on debut, went off 6-1 in a 12-horse field. I think that's kind of important. That means that somebody thought something enough that, this one could be kind of sneaky first time out. The second thing is the replay of this horse. This one walked out of the gate, and from that point on was pretty much ridden like a prep, was never really asked for much. And what I thought, looking at the horse's mannerisms, especially on the head-on replays, I thought this horse showed some turfy action. So the fact the connections returned with an equipment change, obviously to help with the gate break, they switch surfaces, go to the turf, and they route this one, considering this one's out of a enticed Medalla d'Oro sire. They were obviously thinking route anyway with it. I think there's a lot of positives that indicate this horse should improve. Good enough to win? Maybe, maybe not. But definitely somebody I'd consider underneath. And if you can afford it in a pick 5, I'd include spreading with it.
Okay.
The number 6, Snowdonia, the other Dan Blacker runner. Another runner in here who this time they debuted on the turf at Santa Anita sprinting, going 5 furlongs. The comment in the forum says, step slow, too wide, no response. Again, not necessarily an inaccurate comment, but one I thought there's a little bit more than what meets the eye with this one. You'll notice this one also took money going off 6-1 on debut. I thought this was a very good debut effort. And when I was watching the head-on on this horse carried his head very, very high throughout. To me, that's indicative of a horse that was struggling to relax. You'll notice today's equipment changed to the blinkers off. To me, that's an indication of maybe this horse needs it off, needs to be able to see his surroundings, and will relax a lot more.
Yeah.
I thought this horse galloped out extremely strong. And the fact, again, they stretched this one out indicates to me this one's going to appreciate the added ground. Again, I just think this runner can improve today. Should be really good underneath and should also be something that I'd like to include in the pick 5 if you can afford it. Then last but not least, the number 8, Uncle Dude for trainer Philip Diamato. This one I thought was probably the best tape horse, in this race from a standpoint that this was more of an obvious call that this horse should improve. I thought this horse had distinctive turfy action. I thought this was a better than looked effort. This horse was running against the profile. You'll notice going into the far turn, this one kind of got in tight and had to check. The result of that action led to a lot of dirt being hit in this one's face. It resulted in that climbing action that's noted in the comment line. This one got to the outside and then was just running in quicksand out there because that was the worst spot to be down the lane. So I think this one's stretching out, going to the turf. We know Philip Diamato, how good he is first time grass, how good he is first time route. And the 10-1 morning line is just too hard to ignore. So I think these are 3 viable long shots. I think these are 3 good tape horses in this race. And I think they fit either underneath the chalk Sabretooth or the number 1, Ivan the Great, or even could help bolster the pick 5 payout maybe and even get the job done for us. So that's kind of my approach to this race and what I saw from a trip note standpoint.
Yeah, these are horses that you're calling out because you want people to, if they have the bankroll, to certainly try to include on their tickets. Phil D'Amato yesterday had a horse who looked very much like this thought process. Had a sneaky good run in a dirt debut, moved to turf, was 7-2 on the morning line, which I kind of thought was ridiculous. Got hammered into, I don't know, even money or so, and the horse just crushed. So that's a good play in here. Also, I use Optics EQ in the Optics Notes program, and they had good notes on these same 3 horses. Tab Walker, they had Kickback, Improve, Snowdonia, Gallop Plus. Obviously the horse is meant to stretch out, and same thing with Uncle Dude. So I think those are 3 really good horses to play in here and pay attention to. Yeah, the top 2 choices, they're going to be tough, but you're getting great prices on these horses. So call them out there, use them on your tickets if you can. Let's move to race 7, where you'll give some specific wagering strategies. It's a $40,000 optional claimer, non-winners of 1 for fillies and mares, 1 mile on the turf with the rails at 18 feet. The morning line is number 6, Gypsy Woman at 5-2. She was favored in her U.S. debut. She had a little trouble. She could only manage 3rd. She galloped out well. She'll be fit. Cuts back slightly, makes her 2nd U.S. start. Does she move forward today, or does she bounce a little bit?
See, this I think is a great race to talk about and build off of what we talked about, earlier in the seminar. This is the number 6 Gypsy Woman is the typical horse that will be incredibly overbet because of the replay in this race. Gypsy Woman was broke slow, wasn't very, very ranked, checked off heels, got caught in traffic around far turn, didn't get out to like the final 60 yards, and then exploded. Just missed running 2nd, was first on the gallop out. This is the kind of horse that everybody and their mother will say, this is the trip horse of the day. This is so
international
obvious.
Trip horse.
Exactly. Also keep in mind the winner of that race, Sunset Glory, came back and won the stakes race on Friday, beating Linda's Gift. And that was an incredibly impressive effort. So the company is even more flattered by it. Now, what I will say is I think that race is good. I think that race is a key race for runners in it. I just am looking at something that more of the contrarian opinion in the race.
Right.
I think this race has the potential to set up for something coming from off the pace. I think there's going to be plenty of company up front between the 2 Lorana, the 3 cast member, and Gypsy Woman looks to have a fair amount of speed. Keep in mind, Gypsy Woman is also prime for the European bounce.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's just shipped in. I mean, the last race in Ireland was in April, just ran in July, and is now running back 3 weeks later. I mean, this is a horse that's going to be even money first flash, and I can poke a lot of holes into the logic for it. Coming out of that exact same race, everybody focuses on Gypsy Woman. Our top pick, the number 7 Irish Patsy, part of that same exact race, was the worst finisher in the common race, was returning off a 3-month layoff. And this horse had a lot of trouble in that race too. It's just not really noted. It says weighted 2nd, which means weighted on the 2nd turn with no rally. No rally is actually not what happened. Just never got through. It was sitting there waiting on the rail for room, basically all the way to the wire, and galloped out just fine. So while Gypsy Woman's going to attack all of the money, Irish Patsy's probably not going to attract much of it at all. I love the jockey switch to Rispoli. Obviously, Rispoli's had some success with her. He's won twice with her, both her last wins that show, one of which being at Del Mar last year. Fit really, really well for this one to make an improved effort. So our wagering strategy is still going to key off of that Sunset Glory race, but we're going to key the biggest price, the number 7 Irish Patsy, to win. And then we're going to come back with some exactas to the other common horses in the race. The number 116 Arches, who ran second. The Philip Diamata runner, who's honest as can be. She just doesn't win. She's a perfect exacta horse to use. Gypsy Woman will still use, because if she does improve, I mean, if she doesn't bounce, she obviously fits very, very well. She showed that she has some natural talent. So there's no reason to throw away that exacta. And then we're going to go to an outside runner in the number 8, Shocking Gray, who's the other closer in the race. If this race falls apart, she's the other one that's going to be flying. She hasn't been seen since August of last year, but Jeff Mullins is having a quiet, very, very good meet. And I think this one fits just fine underneath. So our bet will be Irish Patsy to win, and then what's called weighted exactas with Irish Patsy, the number 7, over the 1, 6, and 8, and then reverses with the 1, 6, and 8 over the 7.
Yeah. So for those out there who might not know what a weighted exacta is, you're just you're using different denominations. So let's say you have $100 bankroll in this race. You know, how would you allot?
Yeah.
Well, not 100, but how would you allot in terms of the weighted exacta?
Yeah. So basically, a typical bet for me in this spot would be $20 to win on Irish Patsy, $10 exactas with Irish Patsy on top of the 1, 6, and 8, and then maybe $5 reverses with the 1, 6, 8 on top of the 7. Now you could also weight it differently, where you could have, you know, maybe $7 or $8 reverses with maybe the 1 and 6 we like them more over the 7, and only a $5 with the 8. I mean, you can play with the denominations, whatever you're comfortable with. And again, you can scale it up and down, you know, whether you're a bigger better, a smaller better. But the principle is, if Irish Patsy wins, that's the strongest opinion in the race. We want to make the most money with that combination.
Yeah, you need to get paid. So most of the money goes through Irish Patsy on the top end of the exactas. Let's move on to race 8. Maiden special weight, 6.5 furlongs on the main track. The morning line favorite is number 5, Miramati, at 6-5. I think it's fair to say that Miramati, the human, is a favorite of ours. This horse is that rare, a little questionable. It's a rare Baffert who's shown flashes of ability but hasn't won 6 starts. That's very rare for Baffert. The horse has run well. The horse has made some money, but he's been his own worst enemy. He's got some quirks. Last time he couldn't get by a 33-1 shot. He was the 7-5 favorite. He's going to get hammered again, and he could certainly win. But I'm a little intrigued by what you have to say in this race.
Yeah, Miramati's not a fan favorite for most of my friends. We've all kind of got suckered with him over the years, either singling him or kind of keying him as what we thought would be a potential free square, and it hasn't turned out to be. And since today we're going to be playing against him, today's probably the day he breaks through.
Right.
But you can't approach the value of this game with that mindset. This is another great example of a maiden race and looking for value through trip note handicapping. And it just kind of coincides. Right now, Delmar's running so many maiden races. I mean, on an average card, we're looking at somewhere between probably 44% to 50+% maiden races. So trip note handicapping is becoming more and more important in this particular meet. And the runner that I found in here the most intriguing was the number 3 horse, Wayne the Brain. 12-1 morning line, exits that common race. I thought this one, well, there wasn't anything spectacular about the debut. I mean, certainly broke slow and was wide, which was against the profile.
Right.
Took some money, went off 6-1. Obviously, Miramati was one of the favorites in that race, along with the 3rd place finisher, Santorina. But I thought this one was just a good effort on debut and something to build off of. I also thought the workout comments were very, very important on this one. If you go back, and I have notes dating back to this one's debut stating that this one was working really, really well with blinkers. Yet I made the note that when he came onto the track, he wasn't wearing blinkers. So I kind of dismissed him on that day. Yet today he returns back with more positive workouts. And while they don't comment that those workouts are in blinkers, and I'm sure if I went on XBTV, I could find it.
Yeah.
I just haven't got a little lazy on the research there. This one obviously shows in the form that he's going to be wearing blinkers for today's race. And I think that's a big deal. I think this race is primed for something to, pop the gate. We know Miramati tends to kind of hang in the lane. He doesn't really want to go by anybody. He'll press the pace, but he's just kind of a grinder. So if Wayne the Brain can pop the gate today and get in front of Miramati, that could be a really fun stretch drive for us on something that's, incredibly simple. There's nothing complicated about this bet. To me, it's a very simple win bet on Wayne the Brain. I'm looking to get something in the neighborhood of 8-1 or higher on it. Anything shorter than that, I think, is probably a little bit too short for my liking. I'll probably look to play it in different ways, maybe more in doubles Obviously, I'll be playing a pick 5, so it'll be one of my skinnier legs. But I think Wayne the Brain fits really well, and then Miramati is just kind of an obvious exact horse, especially after the scratch of the second choice in the race, the Peter Miller runner, number 6. This is really a $20 win bet on the 3, maybe a $20 one-way exacta 3-5, and a $10 reverse, something like that, to try to make some profit.
That is such good info. That based on everything you said, that horse is super sneaky. I have a couple of notes from that horse as well. First of all, Tom Quigley, who's got a very, very good eye for younger horses. This is a 3-year-old colt. He tweeted the horse that day. So if Tom's tweeting the horse has some good body type and is muscular and is ready to run. We'll see how he looks in the paddock today. But the other thing, we take notes in Formulator, and I have a note down here that it was a Brad Free. This is a Brad Free horse to watch. Said it was just an educational run and can improve next time out. And you're getting such good value because Miramati is going to be overbet. I love that. That is such a super sneaky play in there. Could absolutely blow up the tote board if Wayne the Brain does the job. Let's move on to race 9, last race of the card. $150,000 Solana Beach Stakes for Cal-bred fillies and mares. 1 mile on the lawn. The rails are at 18 feet. I wrote about this race on the Del Mar website. You can go to dmtc.com, the handicapping section, and click on me, and you can find my analysis. I thought this was a really, really tough race. I wanted to try to come up with something clever, and I had a hard time separating a lot of these contenders. So tell us how we're getting paid here.
Yeah, I thought this is the best betting race on the card. I think it's a fantastic handicapping race. When you go back to being introduced to the game and trying to figure out the puzzle of a race and the challenge of it and just handicapping for the joy of handicapping, this is a perfect example of a race like that. There are so many different ways to play the race. Analyzing the pace is fascinating, trying to figure out who's going to trip out, who's coming to a race. All of those factors played a role in the ultimate decision-making of the bet that you just posted here on the screen here. The horse we landed on was the number 5 Moments Pleasure for trainer Craig Lewis. I think this one is going to sit a very, very good trip. I think that this one's fractionally fits the race just fine. I was looking for something that would be sitting just off the pace, but would get first run ideally. I wanted something that was going to be hopefully saving some ground and then tipping out. That's kind of the trip that you want at Del Mar. With the tighter turns, you want to save as much ground as possible. Those that take the overland route, really have to be much the best to get there. I thought that this one, keying off of the May 25th race, which was the Franz Valentine Stakes, when she ran second to Stay and Scam, was probably going to go off the favorite in this race. Yeah. Come post time, probably somewhere in the 7-5, 8-5 range. I thought that was a very, very good race and a good effort. And the thing you have to understand about turf handicapping is that it is so trip dependent. The best horse probably only wins 50% of the time. So while Stay and Scam was obviously much the best on that day, even though the final margin of victory is only a length, there's no guarantee that Stay and Scam is going to trip out today in the same way that Moments Pleasure maybe was a little bit unlucky that day. And the reversal of fortunes could easily go the other way. And yet we're getting, at least on the morning line, we're getting 5 times the value of it. So from that standpoint, I'm just looking to key something that I think is far too high and offers too much value on the morning line, and something that I know is almost as good as the favorite in the race. And if we can just get a little bit lucky with the trip, ideally could light up the tote board for us a little bit. So the approach to this race obviously starts with a win bet. Moments Pleasure, I really wouldn't take anything less than probably 6, 7 to 1 on the horse.
I was going to say 6. Yeah.
Anything short of that.
I think she'll probably be that price. I think she's going to take some money. She's a steadily improving 3-year-old. And to your point, she wasn't that far off Stay and Scam a couple of races ago, and she is going to be a better price. But anyway, keep going. Yeah, no.
So we're going to hope that we trip out on that Stay and Scam, who's probably going to be forwardly placed, might even find herself on the lead, get some pressure up there and get softened up front. So our approach is going to be to try to play Moments Pleasure on top. Again, we're going back to our weighted exactas philosophy. Stay and Scam obviously fits our exacta. It more than likely will be there. I think Rose Maddox is another one. Coming off a little bit of a layoff for Stephen Miotti. She's got plenty of class in here. She runs well pretty much every time. She's a consistent type horse, 15 out of 24, first or second. It's hard to believe she's not going to be there. So if we're right with Moments Pleasure, Rose Maddox is probably certainly part of the exact in the try. Yep. And then we're going to try to sneak in a little bit more of a price, and that's Safa for trainer Gary Studi. This one is a consistent, hard-running, trying sort. I mean, it doesn't seem to matter whether she sprints on the dirt or the turf, or she routes on the dirt or routes on the turf. She's just always there. A little bit camera shy, but she's, I think, a great underneath horse to use in this race. And the 8-1 I thought was pretty enticing to me. So our weighted exactas are going to involve the 2 Ship and Stay and Scam, the 4 Rose Maddox, and the 10 Safa. And then we're going to try to hit the trifecta in this race as well, because I think this is a great try race because of how open it is.
Yeah.
Obviously, those 3 runners will be a part of it. And then we're going to throw in a couple other prices. We're going to throw in the 3 Abita, who was scratched out of Friday's featured for this spot. Again, another runner exiting that Sunset Glory race. That Sunset Glory race is going to be a big deal whether we win or lose today, because we're keying off of that race, particularly in a couple different spots in this late pick 5 sequence. We're also going to use the 4 Court Snort, who I think is another runner in here. That'll be closing from off the pace. I think fits just fine as a trifecta horse. And then the 12 Ultimate High for Rispoli, who draws in off the also eligible list. This one hasn't won since Del Mar last year with guess who? Rispoli was aboard that day. So just a real natural horse to include as part of the trifecta mix. So we'll keep Moment's Pleasure on top and in the second hole for those trifectas, and then hopefully get a big price underneath in the third hole, and hopefully round out the day with a winner.
Yeah, I liked Moment's Pleasure, but this was a scenario where I could have made 5 horses A's, and I don't like to do that, so I decided to just plant a flag, and if I'm right, I'm right. And I ended up with Rose Maddox as my top pick, so we'll see how that plays out. But I absolutely have Moment's Pleasure, as a strong contender. So I love the way you walked us through these few races. We've got some bets to play. We're going to get some action. That wraps up this week's edition of Best Bet. Again, streaming live from Ranch 45. I don't know about you, Tyler, but I'm a little hungry. I'm going to go inside, get something to eat before I head over to the racetrack. But I just want to say thank you so much for giving us your thoughts and taking the time to share your insights today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Frank, and good luck to everyone.
All right. Good luck to you. We'll be back again next week. Like I always say, good luck to us, and let's make some money.